Hey, thanks for doing this. Would you mind introducing yourself, just your name, where you live, and where you got your MBA to kick things off?
Sure thing. My name is Pellegrini. I live in New York City, and I got my MBA from Harvard Business School in 2014.
Awesome. What did you, 2020, probably early 2010s, 2010, 11, 12, you were thinking about pursuing an MBA, exploring the idea. What were you thinking then? Why did you ultimately decide that an MBA was a good path for you?
Yeah. So I think for me, there were really two reasons. The first one is kind of like from an intellectual perspective. I was just very curious how businesses work. So after college, I got an analyst job in investment banking, focused on mergers and acquisitions, the traditional kind of analyst role, working crazy hours. And I thought, for me, analytically, that was extremely interesting. But culturally and also career progression wise, being an investment banker long term, I didn't think was what I wanted to do. I wanted to actually be more involved in building businesses. And so the opportunity to go to business school and look at, hundreds of different companies through cases and understand their business models, how they operate, what they care about, what things make their businesses successful, to me intellectually was very interesting. So that was kind of the first part. And then the second part, I think, was very candidly, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I'd worked in this job that, I, again, enjoyed analytically. Culturally, though, I didn't feel like it was the right fit for me over the course of the long term. So business school gave me an opportunity to really expand, I would say, my knowledge of a variety of businesses, my knowledge of the world, and really kind of think about how I wanted to build my career and really build my life over the course of, the next couple of decades.
Yeah, no, that totally resonates with me too, Ricky. I too also did the 2 years of banking, like right out of undergrad, and I liked it a lot. Loved the people I worked with, but also didn't see it as like a long-term career option for me, at least.
Yep.
Didn't love it that much. And yeah, also had this realization of like, yeah, I know after like the couple years, you figure out like a small sliver of finance, but you also know there's so much out there when it comes to like running a business, how to operate, the other parts of finance, marketing, sales. And so I was also similarly curious. And I think when you go through the MBA ranks, I think a lot of people talk about MBA. It's a common thing, right? You work with people who've gotten their MBAs. So it's one of the options you have in mind. Some of your mentors probably at the bank you worked at probably promoted it a little bit or talked about, their experiences. I was at the same point. I was like 24 thinking about MBA, but also thinking about other jobs. I took one other job before going to my MBA. So it sounds like, I think what's cool here is like you did 2 years as an analyst and then you went to your MBA program.
Yes.
HBS. Okay.
Yep.
So that made you 24 going to your MBA program, just to frame it up a little bit.
Yep. Which, by the way, for me was a ton of fun because, I got to sit in class with folks that had way more experience than me, folks that had,
Yeah.
impacted the world in much more significant ways. And here I am, this person that's just had only 2 years of experience listening to someone that has, I don't know, commanded a nuclear submarine or done all kinds of amazing things. So
No,
for me, that part of it was also kind of like wow, like being in awe a little bit of the folks around me, which was fun.
yeah. I remember that feeling the same way too. And as at HBS, yeah, I think it's important lens just to share because you were looking for like optionality and trying to figure things out, figure yourself out, and that makes sense given where you were in your career. So,
Yep.
Just wanted to highlight that point. So you already started to share a little bit about your experience at HBS while you were there. What are some of your favorite memories, or what kind of sticks out to you when you think back to 2012 to 2014 when you were sitting in the classrooms, hanging out at HBS?
Yeah, I mean, there really are so many of them that it's hard to pick just one. I would say in school, I had a lot of confidence building moments, speaking, answering questions, using the case method in front of 90 incredibly smart peers and amazing professors. So for me, that has helped my ability, I would say, to, speak to public audiences, speak in front of people, really also take an assertive position in many instances where, if you're an analytical person, typically you want to figure out all the options, like do more research. There's always another piece, there's always another stone to turn over and see what's going on. But I think a lot of times in business, you just kind of have to go for it with limited information because time is extremely valuable. And I think the case method encourages that a little bit, right? Because you don't have all the information, and people want decisions, not, hey, what other questions can I ask here? So that was, for me, I very much enjoyed the case method in that regard. I would say on the personal side, of course, you hear a lot about MBAs that get to travel all the time. I traveled, I traveled more than I ever had really before, but not as crazy as some of the weekend road warriors that would just be country every
Just
every
going to
month or two.
Miami, yeah, for Art Basel.
Yeah, every few hours. It felt like every couple of days they were coming back from.
Yeah, where did you go? Where did you travel when you were at HBS?
So the highlights were, I went to Costa Rica with a group. I went to Peru, which was amazing. I went to a few different cities in China as part of our, as part of a global immersion program.
Oh yeah, I did too.
So those were all, a lot of fun. I would say, one memorable one was we went to Costa Rica, and this was like during spring break. It was just us and a couple of and a few friends, and we decided to rent what were the, kind of like the by far the cheapest cars on the rental lot. They barely had any power, and we had the brilliant idea of basically taking the scenic route from the beach to the volcano. And the scenic route, Google Maps did not tell us this, but consisted of driving up into the mountains on remote paths that literally had like sharp stones as the road. It was like truly, and so
off the beaten path.
And people there, nobody else was going up there in cars. Even people only used motorbikes up there because they had the vehicle. So we literally thought that we were going to be, like a tire was going to pop because again, these cars were not the best. And we couldn't even make it uphill. So we had to like back up on the downhill slope and then speed into hills in order to get over it. So again, pretty dangerous thing. I was driving one of the cars. So it was like, 4.5 hours of the, some of the most like intense focus I've ever had. When I finished, I ate a Snickers bar and like had to take a nap for 5 hours. But anyways, that was another fun one that just, I don't know, random, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's and that this trip you said spring break, so you just organized this with some of your classmates, some of your friends.
Yeah,
are like,
exactly.
Let's go somewhere. We have time off classes. We don't have jobs right now, so
exactly.
Let's go somewhere cool.
So
yeah, that's
some of the fun experiences you can get into if you go into it.
Yeah, and this is how you get to know people better, right? You kind of traveling is a great way to get to know someone on a more intimate level, like get to know, build friendships, build relationships with just people you enjoy hanging out with. I think that's an awesome part of business school that like. The schools don't really promote it that much, but it's a huge part of the experience, right? And you don't have to travel. It can just be like a dinner with a group of friends, like locally in Boston for you or wherever your program is based. But then there's also the MBA programs do organize these trips, right? Oftentimes international at HBS. I also went on a trip to China that was through a class. And those trips are awesome too. I don't know about your experience, but like, it's just, they organize everything. There's an itinerary, which is nice. They're giving you access to like different companies and different business people in those local markets. That's a really good experience. And, everyone on the trip has like this shared interest in the location or the industry or something. So two different types of kind of trips you can experience or types of travel you can experience during your MBA program.
Yep. No, 100%. And I would say too, the other thing that I think is important here from a general experience perspective is most of my best memories have come after business school with the folks that I've met there, whether that is them getting married, that, them having kids, that's the other thing. I mean, it's not just the memories during those 2 years. It's the memories after probably that are more meaningful, quite frankly.
For sure. That's cool. All right. So it's been like you said, it's been like almost like nine years since you finished at HBS. So your 10-year reunion's coming up, but give us a sense of what you're doing today, Ricky.
Yeah. So currently I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Knode.ai, and it's spelled Knode.ai, like kind of like knowledge, but no, I don't know. I'll it's fun startup name. And what we do is we basically use AI to look at companies' internal information stores. So this is like Slack, Google Drive, Notion, Confluence, etc. and then enable those companies to both ask questions on top of those and automate tasks. So really very focused on, automating a lot of the tasks that people hate doing at work during the day. That's everything from writing communications to scheduling group meetings to wading through different platforms to try and find everything from like what's our vacation policy to what's our strategy. So again, for me, I've been able to, if you asked me when I was in business school, would I be the CEO, the CEO of an AI company with exclusively engineers that don't have an engineering background, as your other employees, like, I wouldn't have said that. I would not have picked that, right? And so from post-MBA, I worked for a couple of RSC Ventures portfolio companies, ultimately ran on to run product at a startup called Rapid SOS, worked at Amazon Web Services for a couple of years, ran a service there, and then decided to embark on this path. So again, I did the sort of the finance to tech transition, which is not the easiest one to make, but definitely going to HBS helped me make that. And I didn't know that was the transition I wanted to make to from a career perspective at the time I applied. But a few years afterwards, it became pretty clear to me that was what I wanted to do.
Super cool. Super cool. So it sounds like in the past 9 years, you've kind of made the transition going to tech, and then you've been a product manager and kind of a general manager. Would you say that in tech, broadly speaking?
Product manager. I was a COO. I was a CDO of a small company as well prior to this, where I'm co-founder and CEO as well. So I've had a bunch of different interesting roles, up and down,
Very
a bunch of very different companies.
Leading up to Knode. And Knode sounds awesome, because just like the few examples you shared, one of the things that I always like beat myself up over actually is just like writing an update email and how long that can take.
Yep.
And it's not just from like crafting like the template, it's like gathering the information and like having to dig, and usually I hate when I have to like take up other people's time to ask them for like certain pieces of information that are necessary to make the update complete, but just like they're not at the tips of my fingers. So that's huge. And of course, like the classic, like meeting booking of multiple people and stakeholders, that is still today so challenging. It sounds like you're working on something that could be a real huge help there and save a lot of time.
Yeah. Well, look, we hope. I mean, I think what's fun about, just kind of tying it back a little bit to the MBA, that's fun, is that, we are an extremely customer obsessed company. Like, we take pride on that. And a little bit of that comes from AWS, but it is also very much, when you have a sense of how different businesses operate and where those friction points can be of things that are just like very annoying to do, unproductive, things that are repetitive, it really helps you contextualize and frame, what tasks you actually want to target in terms of those automations. So again, it's been fun to like pull on different threads from my past in order to figure out, hey, like what stuff do we want to actually automate? So
yeah, totally. I want to pick up on the thread, actually, speaking of threads, that you mentioned earlier. You mentioned like the Socratic method at HBS and like just like learning from your classmates and all the cases you kind of like learn from. And it helps with your decision-making skills today and your ability to operate with incomplete information you mentioned, which is a huge skill. I'm sure as a co-founder of a tech startup, like you're constantly doing this. This is just like your nature now.
Yeah.
I just want to ask you, is there anything else like, how does your MBA, like any other ways your MBA like shows up in your day-to-day life? You mentioned work, maybe even personally, but for the audience, like how else does your MBA kind of manifest today?
Yeah, so I would say, well, I'll start on the professional side and then kind of go back to the personal. So the thing that has surprised me about my MBA is that it helped me a lot less in a big company context than it has actually as a startup founder. In a traditional career path, you have performance reviews, you have generally a path laid out for you. You have, different spots on the corporate ladder that you can climb. And that is a much more, guided path, right? And an MBA there, yes, it can be a credential that helps you, but really it's going to come down to much more around how you navigate the system that you're in and how you perform there. If you're doing something that is uncertain, right? And that is wading into new territory, there is no established path. And what that means is that a large factor in your success is the group of people that you have behind you. And so for me, that has been particularly rewarding from an MBA perspective, because there have been people who, I didn't even, I would say, know that well in business school, that I reconnect with them, ask them for advice, and they'll, make 10 intros for me, or they'll become, a pilot customer, they'll advocate for me, they'll really go to bat for me. And in ways that have really, frankly, it's been, it's been a very humbling experience just to see how people are willing to go to bat for you. So that in this particular moment, I would say for me as a startup founder has been just tremendously valuable, whether that's from a fundraising perspective, customer perspective, networking, all of those things. And I would say more so than it was, for example, when I worked at AWS, where it was a much more, structured corporate ladder to climb. So that's on the professional side. On the personal side, I mean, you can't, it's very hard to put an ROI on having a couple of new best friends for the rest of your life, right? Those are some of the things that are the most important things, at least in my opinion, of having a meaningful life and having one where you really, feel a great sense of camaraderie and not just camaraderie, but also security, people that will be there for you in both good times and tough times. And so again, my MBA has certainly exceeded my expectations on that front. So on a personal level, it's just been amazing.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think I was speaking with one of your friends recently with Neil, and you guys have an annual trip, right? Some of you that
I don't typically go on that trip, but Neil and I catch up a lot. Whenever I'm in LA, we try to get together. So
that's awesome. Cool. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I think this is an interesting question to ask people, because everyone has a different experience and if things evolve over time. So I'm sure if we redo this in 5-10 years, you might have a different question, right?
Yep.
So very cool. That it has an impact on both your professional and your personal life in such a meaningful way. You can tell just by your expression, I think. I want to take it back a little bit. I think a lot of people that might be watching this are exploring an MBA as an opportunity or an option as a next step, or and so I'm curious to know talk about a little bit about that the application process, but not the kind of the nuts and bolts of it, but more so just taking it back to maybe what you share about yourself with the admissions committee in your essays. I think a common framework, at least when I was thinking, I applied to 5 probably business schools, and I think a common thing you need to figure out, a framework was what are your short-term goals and long-term goals before you can even start filling out any kind of essays or applications. Kind of have to figure those things out to develop your application, your story, essentially who you are. Do you remember what you might have shared with the HBS AdCom or maybe some of the other programs that you applied to?
Yeah, so this one I struggle with because, frankly, I don't remember what was in my essays because it was 10 years ago, or it was, 12 years ago, almost 12 years ago at this point when those applications would have come in. I would say, unfortunately, I don't think I have particularly good advice on the admissions side, other than, the one thing I would say is you definitely want your character to show through in the documents that you write. It's not just professional, and it's not just about what you've achieved, but it's also, convincing them that you are going to be a positive force in the world, and I think that's something that I would also advise as well. I don't remember exactly what was in my essays, but I do remember that. As part of my interviews, a lot of the questions were were basically surrounding that, not directly, but, it was clearly something that they were very keenly attuned to and looking for. So
totally. Yeah. And you mentioned earlier in this conversation, you didn't really anticipate becoming a founder of a tech startup or anything like that. Did you have a particular dream job or dream career aside from being a football player, a basketball player, an NFL football player? You probably gave up on those hopes and dreams prior to your application, but did you have a dream job at that point?
Yeah. I forgot to tell you, Mike, I just actually, entered for the NBA draft next year. So
you're in the combine. Congratulations.
Yeah,
huge.
Pretty cool. But no, ended up, frankly, again, like, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I do one small thing that I didn't want to do over the course of the long term. And so, for me, I've always found tremendous motivation from building teams. So that was always something that I think appealed to me more, whether it was being a manager, hiring a team, creating a company, that kind of thought process and team management was always something that I really, really, got a lot of energy from. And so I don't recall if this was, during my application process or not that I had said these things, just because, again, your application, you want to make sure that your story is, both consistent and conveys great things about you. And, to that point, I had never managed a team, right? Because in finance, as an investment banking analyst, you are not managing teams generally. You are, doing work yourself and doing individual contributor work, which is also obviously tremendously valuable. But so, yeah, candidly, I don't necessarily remember exactly what I shared with that. Yeah. But I guarantee you it was a lot different than where I am.
Yeah,
but I'm very happy about that, by the way. That's
for sure.
I mean, that's a good thing. So.
Yeah. And that's for applicants. One last question, then, just a slight iteration on that previous question. But instead of for applicants, what about current MBA candidates? So we call current MBA students MBA candidates on LinkedIn. Do you have any parting advice for anyone in their first, second year? Maybe they're trying to figure out what to do. Maybe they're thinking about starting a company. Any advice for them?
Yeah, well, look, this is always a question that's fun because you get to reevaluate it however often you want to in life, and especially if you're going to an MBA program, chances are you're already, a step up, or have a great leg up to most people that are thinking about this in their, mid-20s, late 20s, early 30s, mid-30s. It's always a question you can keep asking. So my advice would be open to figuring out what you really enjoy doing, not just from an industry level, but really just from a task level. Like, do you enjoy building teams? Do you enjoy managing people? Do you enjoy mediating conflict? Do you enjoy negotiating? Do you enjoy public speaking? Do you enjoy more creative stuff? Do you enjoy analytical stuff? Do you enjoy doing math? Do you enjoy writing? Like, these kinds of things. I mean, it sounds very basic, but different, like, those skills apply so differently in many different jobs. And I didn't, that was something I didn't discover probably till post my MBA. How much, really kind of coming to the realization how much I love building teams, and also frankly how much I do enjoy writing in a business context. Not like, I don't enjoy writing novels, but I do enjoy actually writing, substantive business communications that explain interesting things or dive deep into those things. And that has served me, very well, I would say, in my capacity when I worked as a product manager and product management. And then also too, I found that I actually really enjoyed the creative side of thinking up new software and features and making those, work within constraints. So those were things that were very different than, any job I'd experienced previously. So I would just encourage you, think very tactically about the things that when you do them, they give you energy, and then where that might be best applied from a job perspective. Because again, a sales job is so different than an analyst job, is so different than an engineering job, than a product management job. There are so many ways to build a really meaningful, lucrative and fun career.
Totally. No, that's great advice. And you can only learn what you like and what you don't like by doing new things. So you learn something about your first kind of career, and then you've had kind of other jobs and careers along the way leading up to what you're currently doing today. And only through that process can you really ask yourself along that journey, do I like this? Is this giving me energy? Is this not giving? How do I feel when I do this? So it's an iterative process. And for me personally, I do this all the time. I try to do this more. So thank you for this advice, because it's reminded me to probably do another personal check-in. But these things change, what gives you energy, what you like doing throughout the year. So really, really great piece of advice, something that is top of mind for me today. I'm sure is going to help a lot of people. Yeah. Ricky, thanks so much for sharing this. It's Ricky, HBS 2014, co-founder of Knode.ai, Knode.ai. Check them out. Thanks so much for doing this, Ricky.
Thanks so much for having me, Mike.
Awesome. Thanks.